Okay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Illuminate session, where we're being joined by special guest Jodee Bock, who's here to talk to us about conscious leadership. Jodee is an author of several books, a podcast, and speeches and blog posts. Jodee is a thought leader who has been called a boat rocker and a people enhancer, thanks to her unique ability to add a new perspective to common ways of thinking. Jodee considers herself an accidental entrepreneur who left a corporate job so she could help people stay relevant, stay awake, and stay engaged. Her coaching and consulting business underwent a transformation in 2020 where she rebranded under the banner of Get Real, radical, energized, authentic, and learning focused. Her new book is called Just Give a Shit. Dare to care, get real, and transform your world. So, thank you so much, Jodee, for joining us. I'm so looking forward to this conversation together.
Oh, thank you. Me too. Thanks, Catherine.
Yeah. So first off, I want to ask you about this Get Real. What
Yeah.
can you break down? What is the acronym and how can we
Yeah.
apply this to our lives?
Yeah. So in 2020, when everything shut down, as you know, if you lived through that, you know how that was. I hired a coach because what do you do when everything shuts down? You hire a coach.
Yeah.
And he helped me work through what was important to me. And through our conversations, it just came out that he kept saying, well, everything you're saying is about get real, get real, get real. And I said, well, because we need to get real, like dig in. And he said, well, let's create something around that. So real acronym. I'm an English major, so I love words anyway.
Yeah.
So we came up together, he helped, but we came up with radical, energized, authentic, and learning focused. And when you hear radical, a lot of people get kind of freaked out about that because they think about radical as radicalized and, the negative part of that. But when you get back to the root of the word radical, it actually means root. Like a radish is a root vegetable. So getting
Okay.
back to what's the root of us,
Yeah.
not wild and crazy out here. That's like the third definition in the dictionary. But getting back to the root of us is radical
Mm.
because so few people take that time and effort and energy to do that work, right? So
Yes.
that's the radical. Energized, of course, you know that, Catherine, in the work you do, it's everything's energy. And so
Yes.
instead of making it like woo-woo stuff out there, I bring it down and make it really practical ways to think about energy. Even though you can't touch it, you certainly feel it.
Mm.
And so we just
Yes.
talk about that, and I use some different more grounded. I don't mean to compare, but I think a lot of people who are new to the whole field of energy get a little freaked out about that too.
Yeah.
So I try to bring that back to manageable terms. So that's E. The A is authentic. Well, duh. I mean, if we're in real, authentic is really getting to know yourself and then not being afraid to bring that forward in whatever way that is for you, no matter where you are. So we talk about that. And then the L is learning focused. And that might be the most important one because it's keeping us in a space of not never being done with
Mm.
our learning, right?
Yes.
Um, certainty kills curiosity.
Yes.
And so if we're not learning focused, we fall into unconscious leadership or unconscious, living in our lives. And that's by default. And that doesn't
Yes.
take any effort. It just creates a lot of upset. And
Yeah.
so learning focus is really important to me.
I really love that you said that. Was reading a book about a year and a half ago, and he said one of the most dangerous things we can say to ourselves is, I know that. And
Hmm.
instead to change it into, I've heard that before,
Hmm.
to keep your mind open and curious, because even though we've heard it 100 times, if we're not living it, then we
Yes.
still don't actually know it.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, and I know you're a fan of Wayne Dyer's too. And,
Yeah.
Wayne Dyer is the person I listened to forever who got me to understand the difference between knowing something and having knowingness about it.
Yes.
And so I think that's what you're saying in
Yeah,
that learning.
yeah, to embody it, right, is a completely different experience rather than just having knowledge in our minds. Because I know I've been a person who's walked around with a lot of knowledge, but without applying that knowledge and embodying it, it was just like regurgitation of knowledge without actually living it.
Yeah. And I think what I didn't know that either. I did the same thing, and I didn't realize that came across as hoity-toity or,
Mm,
I'm above you. And I was just trying desperately to prove myself and my own worthiness by getting a lot of information because I
yeah,
had all these beliefs and not even beliefs. I had all this knowingness about what I thought was important, but I didn't really know how to get that word out. So I'd
Yes.
read somebody else who said the same thing, and then I'd say, well, if you don't believe me, believe Wayne Dyer, or
Yes.
kind of, but that was before I really knew, well, before I really accepted my own real.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. And when did that shift happen for you? Was that at it during 2020? Is that when?
Yeah. Wouldn't it be nice if we could go back and go, that was the day? You know,
Yes.
um, I did the Landmark Forum in 2003. And back in 2003, that was my first real dipping of a toe. No, 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 a fire hosing of personal development, awareness. I'd always been curious, but I didn't really know what I was doing back then. In 2003, that sort of was my gateway into my own journey, I guess.
Yeah.
And from then on, I can't look back. I don't know my life before that anymore.
Fair enough. Fair
Yeah.
enough. And I know you talk a lot about conscious leadership. What
Hmm.
does it look like to be a conscious leader in this day
Yeah.
and age?
So that term came to me, I don't know, I remember where I heard it specifically many years ago, but in 2018, I came across a book called Becoming a Conscious Leader by Gina Hayden. And I took that whole year of 2018 to really dig into that concept. I read that book over the course of a year and
Okay.
took notes. So that whole idea of being conscious in your leadership came to me then. And then it became more clear a few years ago when I found the book, The 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership.
Okay.
And their framework makes so much sense to me as I work with people who are kind of new to this concept of conscious leadership. They define it as above or below a horizontal line. Just imagine a horizontal line. You're either above the line or below the line. And
Okay.
in their terminology, above the line is conscious and below the line is unconscious. And the way they define it is conscious is being open, curious, and committed to learning.
Okay.
Being unconscious is closed, defensive, and committed to being right.
Mm. Okay.
So let's just use that as our jumping off point.
No, I love that. I've never heard of conscious in that specific term before,
Mhm.
but there's a big knowing inside of me that goes, yes, when I hear that. And so someone who's a conscious leader, they're open, they're curious, they're doing this. How can they help those who are, say, under that line?
Yeah. That's the good question right now. That is because what has worked, no, I'm gonna reframe that. I don't even know if we know what has
Okay.
worked in the past because we get short-term wins if we have a finite mindset which says that this is the goal right now. I'm going to push people to do things. I'm going to motivate them to get this thing done. And if we think that's worked, then all we do is keep doing that push and that motivation based on the fear of what will happen if we don't.
Yeah.
So if that's the result we say we want as leaders, why would we change our mind if that works for us,
Okay. Yes.
right? So I would say there has to be, again, I'm using language that feels a little certain, but I don't mean that. In my observation of what I'm working on, I'm noticing that when people in a leadership role are feeling some sort of something. I'll call it restlessness and discontent,
Hmm.
to use a quote by Edison. Restlessness and discontent are the first necessities of progress. If they're feeling that, like, oh, it's working, we're getting stuff done, but it feels like there's something missing or it feels, a certain way, I think that creates a whole different way of being as a leader, which they might not even know is waking up to consciousness. And
Mm.
so if they themselves have not done this kind of work, I think it remains an unconscious way of being. But the thing is, if you're unconscious, you just don't know any better. How would you
Yes.
know if you hadn't had that like dawning on you? Like the light sort of comes to you. And if you don't know that, you're still under the line, just
Yeah.
trying to do things to be right about it.
Yeah.
So that's a complicated question, I
And it
think.
100% is because I don't actually know a specific way to get results,
I
right?
know.
It's some people are open to it or they're ready to hear it,
Mhm.
and other people are in that kind of, um, I call it almost like a separated state
Mhm.
where no matter what words you use, they've got that defensiveness that's coming up.
Right, right. And I think what I'm learning in the process of this, because it's a process for me, this is not a done deal, right?
Yeah.
When I share my lived experience, knowing that I'm partnering with a greater truth, but I'm not saying it that way, because
Yeah.
that, especially my corporate work, that feels way too woo-woo for people. Back when I had a job before I started my own business, the last job I had was as a leadership consultant in a manufacturing organization.
Okay.
And the way they got funding was by showing results.
Yeah.
They hired me to do leadership development, which, how do you measure that? And one day my boss said to me, Jodee, what you do is touchy-feely crap that makes me puke.
Okay.
And that's what I keep going back to in my mind as my kind of jumping off point. So if there are people who are resisting their own awakening in their
Yeah.
leadership roles, I keep thinking of my boss, Randy.
Yeah.
And I keep thinking, would this make Randy feel defensive?
Mm,
And that's how I think about it differently about sharing. Like I said, sharing my lived experience, partnering
yeah.
with my own truth, but not necessarily telling them that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That way, I don't feel like I'm telling them the 1, 2, 3 step method
Mm,
for, waking up. I just say things like, well, God, when I like at the story I just shared with you, you
yeah.
know, I didn't know. I thought it was me. I thought I was wrong. And in that space, I had to go, reflection, reflection, reflection.
Yeah.
And what does this mean for me? I can either get curious or I can get furious. And I
Mm,
used to get really furious because I didn't know how else to be. But through
yes.
that process, right? It's been a process and it still is.
Yeah. And so when you allow yourself to get curious versus furious, what does that look like for you? What kinds of
Mhm.
questions are you asking yourself? How are you going deeper into your own knowing?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I notice is how it feels, right? It doesn't feel good to be furious. And so I notice in my body, it's in my jaw and
Mhm.
my shoulders. And so when I sense this falling below the line, wanting to be right, that's what I call it now. Instead of furious, I know when I'm like, you're wrong, I am right. And so then I go, everything that frustrates or upsets me has a message for me, or I wouldn't be frustrated or upset, right?
Yeah.
So then I have to ask myself, okay, what else could this mean? What is this here to teach me?
Okay. Such simple questions.
So simple. Not
And
easy, but simple.
yes, yes. And I know for myself, throughout my journey, there was a period of time where I wanted to be the one who was in the right, that whole defensiveness and whatever. And once you kind of move into that space of curiosity, it's very humbling. It's very like, oh, this trigger has nothing to do with this person. This is my emotion that I've created within myself. And it makes it really difficult to be right or to hold a fight with anybody because you start to go, okay, I can see all sides on this now.
Right on. And that's what's so, I don't know how it is in Canada, but in America right now, it is so hard to, well, it can be hard to stay in the middle, to
Mm,
find, a space where, because we're so divided politically
yeah.
right now. We are so divided.
We're on
And I've
election
been,
day today,
oh, you
and
are, that's right.
it's a big
Oh,
division.
you have the
So,
same thing. Yep.
yes.
Because everybody's mad at me. All sides are mad at me, right? You're not taking my side
Yeah.
against the other side. And I'm like, but does it have to be a fight against? Can it be a
Yeah.
stand for? No, because that's passive and you're not doing anything. Yeah, okay, I get that.
Yeah. 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 It's really hard when you see it on a global scale.
Mhm.
And then you also see it kind of like broken down into even companies. You can see
Yes,
where division happens in companies. You can see it within the family units where division has happened. And I find more and more we fight for our right to be
we
angry.
do.
We
Mhm.
fight for our right to divide. And, there's that old rock and roll song, we're going to fight for our right to
Like to
party. But we're
party.
not
Yeah.
partying anymore. We're just getting angrier and
You're so right. You are so right. That's just such a good example.
angrier. So, how do you help people navigate through these kind of divisions, especially when there's so much language in the media and stuff to separate ourselves, to divide, and to battle against? What is your encouragement to people through that?
Well, we start with the line, we start with above and below the line. And I call it now with my clients that I'm working with. Work with a lot of corporate. organizations and people. We start with foundational, fundamental elements. And I tell my own story about that. If we're building a shed in the backyard, you need a foundation that's solid or it's going to be all wonky.
Yeah.
So I don't like it. I don't like fundamentals. I played basketball in college and I tried to play piano when I was a little kid. I don't want to play the scales. I just want to go play the song. I don't want to
Yes.
do the drills. I just want to play the game, right? But I need to know the fundamentals of things before I can build. Otherwise, I'm building shaky. So I call it now, we're going to just break down fundamentals into fun and mental with
Mm.
duh in the middle. Because when you hear something and you go, well, duh, then you know you hit on a fundamental.
Yeah.
And those are the things we're going to start building on. And one of those fundamentals is above or below the line. So when people have a frustration or whatever, I'll just go, did you go unconscious? I'm just wondering, is there any place that you might have gone unconscious, which is closed, defensive, committed to being right? I don't know that, and I could be wrong about this. And they'll say, shut up, Jodee, I hate you, thank you. They'll have that kind of like, oh, I don't want
Yeah.
that. I don't want that to be the way it is. Yeah, we get to the point at some point where we can't really argue with that anymore.
Yeah.
There's no need to fight for that limitation anymore because it keeps us limited, right?
Yeah.
And so then we learn that fighting for, like you said earlier, fighting for the things we think we want keeps us stuck and doesn't allow us to see anything differently. So it's a
Yeah.
process in itself, right? It's a process in itself. I don't try to anymore. I used to. I don't try to fire hose people who I know are thirsty anymore.
Mm.
I
Gotcha.
used to. Here's the fire hose. You need this. And I'm learning to. Patience is not one of my strong suits, but I'm working on it. I worked at an organization one time that used to say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Yeah.
But you can feed it salty food and show it where the water is. So we're just talking
Oh,
about pretzels and peanuts and popcorn and chips. Feeding them the salty food and giving them the access to the water.
I love that because I'm also not a very patient person. I'm like, okay, I know where we're going. Let's get there. Let's get there.
Yep.
Let's get
Yep.
there. Um, and I often have people say to me, you can lead a horse to water, you can't force it to drink. And now I know I can feed them salty snacks, though, let them get
Go where the
thirsty.
water is.
I
Because
love that.
it's hard for people to argue with their own idea,
Mm,
right? So
yeah,
it's their idea. I don't care who gets the credit anymore. I used to.
yeah,
I used to want all the credit. And now it doesn't matter because the world I live in has so many needs, I mean,
yeah.
I guess that's a judgment in a way. To me, it's an observation, and the world I live in could benefit from a lot more love.
Yes, yes. The world I live in could benefit from a lot
Yeah.
more love too, for sure. For sure. Now, I want to kind of step back to something you had said earlier about, asking someone, have you fallen unconscious? Um, because the way you said it, it comes across as a very kind of loving, encouraging question to just kind of stop someone in that perhaps defensiveness or that limitation that they're in to bring them back to the here and now. Um, how do you encourage people to, I'm going to say, get to more of a neutral place where they can be asked that question
Mhm.
without that question being the thing that fires them off? Even though
Yeah.
I know you said they go, oh, shut up, Jody, I hate
Yeah.
you, whatever.
Right, right,
But
right, right, right.
it's a
I
whole
don't think they really
process that
say
goes through. Yeah.
that. It completely is. And so part of that is building the trust up front,
Yeah.
building, showing, at least in my case, showing your realness,
Mm,
showing what I'm about. I'm
yeah.
not here to make you do anything. I'm not here to convince you of anything. And if you don't believe that in your own understanding of things, you are not obligated to work with me.
Yeah.
I'm not here to convince you because I know that a person convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. And so I want it to be your idea. I want it to feel right to you. And if it doesn't feel right to work with me at this time, I know there are lots of people I can recommend and suggest. I'm really good at connecting.
Yeah.
So I'd love to do that for you. And what I notice is when I kind of take that barrier down a little bit and kind of say, there's no obligation here.
Yeah.
It causes people to hear a little bit differently, I think, in those
Mm,
initial conversations. And when I try to say all the time, I could be wrong about this. I'm wondering. I use that language a lot because I use it for myself. I'm wondering and I'm pondering. I wonder about this. And so let me ponder it for a second. And I could be wrong. I wonder if it's blah, 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 this. And they'll go, no, that's dumb. And I'll go, good. I'm glad we cleared that up because yeah, great. And once in a while, there's a seed planted when they're defensive. And they're
yeah.
like, oh, crap, she saw through me. Jeez, dang. Right. And I'm
Well,
just planting a seed. I'm just throwing everything out there to see what comes up.
okay. I love that approach to it because it's not you, I'm right, and look at this
Mhm,
thing that I
mhm,
found within you that needs to come out
mhm,
now. It's a curiosity, and now
mhm.
you go discover it within yourself. Does this resonate?
Yeah. And that goes against what, executive coaching for them. Like in this one client I have, we don't call it coaching because that feels too woo-woo to them. We call it one-on-ones. And
Okay.
if you want a one-on-one, you can. I work with the whole organization and everything I do with them is elective. It's not mandatory. And that has been really fun because every now and then I'll see another person on my calendar, another person on my calendar. And
Yeah.
then my hope is that somebody will talk to somebody else within their organization and say, have you talked to Jodee lately? Because she can really give a different perspective.
Mm,
So executive coaching is quite different, I think, from this is what you need to do and do this assignment and come back to me next week and do this. And if you don't do it, then don't come back. I've had that experience in executive coaching as a client, or as a person who hired a coach.
yeah.
And that doesn't resonate with me personally. I'm not
Yeah.
saying that's wrong or anything. What I'm learning is what seems to produce a result that we together have determined in our coactive coaching that the client desires.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And
Mhm.
so you work with clients one on one, but you're also doing these kind of big corporate events for people as well. Do you find that there's themes that I guess all of us go through in our just human development that it becomes almost like a template of, oh, right, I remember when I was there, and oh, yeah, I remember that thought system as well?
I would have to ponder that, and I'm sure the answer is yes. And so as I ponder that, I wonder if somewhere in there is personal accountability. Somewhere in there is I'm no longer, telling or resisting
Mm,
my responsibility in this. That's somewhere. I'm not sure in which order. I think one thing that occurs to be missing in a lot of cases is critical thinking skills.
mm,
We've been told at least my experience has been in church settings, don't think, just do. Don't think about this. I'm telling you what it is, and if you have any questions, then you don't have enough faith or whatever. So then I've been conditioned, oh, when I have a thought, it's from the devil or it's
ah,
from something else, right? So I've been conditioned that way. And I think in some cases we bring that with us if anybody has an experience that's similar to that to our corporate settings. Oh,
yeah.
whoever is the boss or in charge or who has gotten to this place must know better than I.
Hmm.
And that was the process I went through for many years. I must be wrong if I'm curious. And so I had to undo a lot of those things, not to make the other person wrong, but to make myself potentially right.
Yeah.
And not a below the line right, but wow, could that be a possibility in the
Mm,
curiosity?
yeah.
So critical thinking. I think, I guess I don't know this yet, but are people just naturally curious or naturally not curious?
I think we're naturally curious. Like when I
Yeah.
think of my children when they were born and witnessing them grow up, there's a natural curiosity.
Mhm.
There's a lot of let's Google that together. Ooh, I don't
Yeah.
know the answer. Let's find the answer.
Right. So then, if given that it would be something that we're born with, then wherever that gets shut down,
Yeah.
I'd like to get back to that
Yeah.
because if we're curious, then we're in the space of possibility instead of the space of probability.
Yeah.
You know, if we continue to do things the way we've been doing them, we'll probably get a result that's like the one we've had. And in some cases, if that's what we want to go back to the way it was in the 1950s, or we want to go back to the way it was when we had more control over things. Well, that wouldn't leave a whole lot of room for possibility.
Yeah.
And so in that space, I always have to ask, is this what you truly desire? Well,
Mm,
I don't know. I didn't know I had a choice. Got it. So what if you did?
yeah.
And then it's bringing the curiosity to the conversations. And sometimes that freaks people out a little bit. Their organization might not be ready for that much, curiosity, because what I've experienced myself in three different cases, when I started asking questions, I got either let go or freed up or asked to leave
Yeah.
because I guess in looking back, my light outshone them, right?
Yeah.
I mean, meaning it blinded their eyes in some way.
Yeah. So, what encouragement would you offer to those who are, say, working in a corporate business who
Mhm.
are ready to get more real with how they're living, but are afraid of what are the repercussions if
Mhm.
they start to access this?
Yep. Please don't do it inside your organization until you've had an opportunity to meet with somebody who is like you, right? So find a place outside your organization and see whether that resonates with you in a mastermind group or in a book study group or in something outside work. Because if it doesn't resonate with you there and you try to bring something inside your company that isn't you being authentic,
Yeah.
it's not going to land well. So I'd say shore up your own authenticity
Mm.
outside your company before you try to make some changes inside. That would be one suggestion.
Okay. Okay. And my other question, because you were talking a little bit about personal responsibility and accountability.
Hmm.
Um, so in a situation like that, where perhaps you're embodying more of your authenticity, you're being more radically honest with yourself, you're showing up energetically, like you're aligned with everything that your values are, you've played it out with smaller groups, you go to your corporation, you go, these are my curiosities, this is where the direction I want to take the business. And then they go, no, we're going to let you go.
You then I'm glad you laid it out that way because that is a definite possibility that could definitely happen. And so I would look at that. I'd dig into the E of the real, which is energy.
Yeah.
And I'd say, is there a vibrational match or a
Mm,
vibrational mismatch here?
yeah.
Because if what we're really doing when we dig into getting real is looking to find those vibrational matches, the reality is the gap is going to widen as you do the work and the rest of the people they're not bad people. They're
Yeah.
just not yet awake. And I don't know if I should even say this, like, but it could happen in personal relationships too.
100%. I'm just thinking there's been so
Mhm.
many experiences that I've had in my life where I'm up leveling myself, I'm
Mhm.
embodying more of my natural light, and relationships start to fall apart. Business partners start to kind of drift away. And there's a lot of grief that comes with that,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
also a lot of celebration as you're like, I'm more me now, though,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and part of that is I don't know about you, Catherine, but in my upbringing, I was not encouraged to feel things,
Mm,
especially at work. You just do your job, put your head down. It's called work for a reason. It's not called play. You don't have
yeah.
play shops, you have workshops. So don't, get out of here. Well, feeling your feelings is a pretty important part of about being real. And
Yes.
so getting into that space of feeling your feelings all the way through, I have a part in my latest book, the Just Give a Shit book, that kind of breaks down all four of those areas: radical, energized, authentic, learning focused. And in the radical space, it talks about feeling your feelings and
Yeah.
naming them. Oh, I didn't know how to do that. I had
Mm,
no idea how to do that.
yeah.
I I found Danielle Laporte's work was the first work I found when she was naming your feelings. What?
Yes.
That was so radical to me at the time. So in the book, I talk about the feelings wheel. Just go to feelingswheel.com and print out a color feelings wheel, and that will just go. There's a lot more feelings than just happy and sad.
Well, and
Like,
isn't it crazy that most of us are taught you're either happy, sad, or mad? Like there's really, those are the three main feelings, but there's hundreds of feelings,
oh,
and that feeling wheel can really help you understand what you're actually feeling.
yeah. So when you're at work and you're having a conflict with somebody, and I'm I do it gently, I think, because I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to fire, but I'll say, okay, okay, Bob made you mad because you and Bob had an argument. Tell me more about that. When you understand your own values, like what is important to me, really, when you get mad, let's just use anger as the first one, it's probably because a value was stepped on.
Yeah,
Bob either did that on purpose or didn't, right? There was a value of yours that was stepped on. And when you feel enlivened and I guess I'd go happy, it's because a value was celebrated.
yeah,
So can we kind of start digging into that? What is it about what Bob said to you that really hit you as, let's talk more about that. And if they don't want to, that's completely fine. I just want to leave you with that. I'll say to them, just leave you
yeah,
with that. Ponder that. Just ponder that this week. What was it that Bob said that really created that in you? And let's
yeah.
just see if we can uncover that value.
I think that's so encouraging to know that you're doing this work and
Hmm.
helping people to understand that what Bob did in many ways was not actually personal. What was
Right.
triggered in you is what's the personal bit.
Hmm.
Because
Yep.
I find for a lot of people, everybody's just doing what they do,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
what's offensive to one person, totally not offensive to another person. And that's where I think it's so interesting as for us as humans to really get curious as to what about this has really upset you.
Yeah. And I think I love that you're saying it this way because we're guiding people into this. If they haven't had a reason to do that kind of work or haven't really had the interest in doing that kind of work, how could they possibly do it themselves?
Yeah.
I mean, I sense we're just shining a light. I'm just shining a flashlight. I'm not better than. I don't know. I know what I'm working on for me.
Mm,
But I'd rather go with you. Let's just go together. I'm not here to be the guru for you. Although I love
yes.
what you said about Wayne Dyer guru.
Yes, it was a live talk that we were at, and he said, if you spell guru out, Guru, and
I know,
mind
right?
blow. I was like, okay, so I'm my own guru, even though I'm there listening to him going, you're my guru.
Hmm.
He was my first
Hmm.
introduction really
Hmm.
into the new age world and just listening to him speak. And
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I think he was probably one of mine too. I got to meet him in person. I have a picture with him. That was just highlight of my life.
yeah,
Uh, because he's an example of someone whose energy, man, you could, I didn't have language for it at the time, but I felt something different just being in
yes.
the room with him and then getting to have a hug from him. It was just, that's a whole other story we could talk about at some point, but man.
I understand. I will say
Hmm.
that. I understand. His
Hmm.
presence is just,
Yes,
it
yes.
really is to me the consciousness of love. That's what he
Hmm.
embodied so perfectly and so beautifully.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I know you brought up your book, but let's go talk about that. Give a shit?
Yeah, just give a shit.
Let's give a shit. I love it.
I don't know if I have one in front of me right. Well, I could pull it off the shelf. It's right there. So yeah,
Mm. Just give a shit. Love it. Dare to care, get real, and transform your world.
yeah. Not very big, tiny little book,
Yeah.
lots of white space. Here's the weird thing about this. I'm doing a book study of it right now in a group, and I actually am writing a lot of notes in my own book. We
That's
did part
amazing.
two. I know we did part two on Saturday in my group, and I was writing a whole bunch of stuff, and I thought this is really kind of weird. And I was in the conversation about it. I wasn't leading it.
Yeah.
And I underlined stuff and then I wrote stuff in the margins and I thought that was kind of an interesting process for me. It was kind of fun.
A past version of you created this opportunity for this
Right.
now version of you to,
Right. And it was only like right at the beginning of the year, this year. It's only like 4 months old. And
I
so,
guess that's the power of the book for
right.
you, though, is it's
Yeah.
helping you go
Yeah.
deeper within to your own experience. So,
Right.
can you share a little bit? What is the book about? And
Yeah. Well, we talked about real. We already talked about that.
yeah,
We broke down, what the real stands for. And so the whole point, I think, when I wrote this was I feel like what's missing, especially for leaders in the world, and leader, you can use that however you want to. It doesn't mean title, tenure, position to me. It means people who are willing to go first in
mm,
something. And so if you find yourself as a leader who has any of those frustrations that we've been kind of talking about, that restlessness, that discontent, then there could be a way to, instead of stand on the sidelines or stay below the line and complain about it, there could be a way to do something differently.
Mm.
And the action is where the results come from, at least in the world we live in right now.
Yeah.
But the actions and the results come from the being behind it, not the doing of the stuff. So, what are we being in the process of figuring ourselves out? This
Mm,
book can help with that. And so, on the in the back of the book, it says Jodee challenges you to redefine your approach to compassion,
mm.
empathy, and personal growth. I feel like that's sort of missing. I feel like we've kind of lost kindness.
Yeah.
Because you're wrong and bad. I said earlier about the divisions we have. If
Yeah.
you're not with me, you're against me.
Yeah.
And I go back to Brene Brown's work, Dare to Lead, all the things she's been talking about. We're not an either or world.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
just feels like it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what if we got into that messy middle where yes and is possible? This book will give you some things to think about and will actually have room for you to write some things. And if you choose not to do that because you want the easy button, and this isn't for you. This is
Yeah.
a book that's going to cause you to ponder, but it's not very long. I don't go into a ton of detail about the how of things or even what the things I'm talking about are. I
Yeah.
want them to be seeds planted for you, like they were
Oh.
for me, I guess, over the weekend when I did this.
Well, and I think that's great because it's something that you could then go back to as you
Mhm.
kind of progress and then go back to the book and ask yourself these
Right,
series of questions and ponder about it again because we're always evolving. We're
right,
always
right.
becoming something new.
I do have a card deck that goes with it too.
Oh,
So
amazing.
a card deck, what you can pull a card in any one of these four areas, and then it gives you I'll just pull one and share with you. This is yellow, so this is learning focused. Yellow is learning focused, black is radical, red is energized, orange is authentic, and yellow is learning focused. So you just pull a card from whatever you want. This one says, just random pull. Notice what you notice. What is drawing your attention?
Mm.
And the assignment is notice what you see and hear and observe when you're not normally paying attention. Pull yourself out of the situation and observe it instead of being involved in it and see what this perspective might teach you.
Ah, I love that.
And then you can use that however you want to. There are 52 cards, 52 weeks in a year. I mean, a lot of options I give you in this little guide. Here's some ways you can use it. Because I just want people to have tools in their toolboxes. I don't want anybody to ever say I didn't know how to do it. It
Mm.
was all theory.
Yeah.
And I think I was there at some point in my life. I don't know how. I don't know how. I don't know how. And I
Yeah.
kept asking how, but I never took accountability for my own how because my why wasn't established.
Yes, yes. And I,
Right?
I can remember being in that area of I don't know how, but then
Mhm.
I also felt a great shame because I didn't know
Mm.
how. And I felt like I
Yeah.
should know. So I didn't know who can I ask
Yes.
that's not going to judge me for asking because it seems like it should be so basic that I should
Hmm.
just know this,
No.
right? But none of us are actually being taught this unless we
Mm-mm.
actively go out to search for the answer ourselves.
Mhm. So true. So true, Catherine. That is such a I'm so glad you said that because you helped me realize I'm not in this alone. What you just said is exactly how I felt. And the fact that you articulated it in the way you articulated it even helped me right now go, "Oh, thank goodness I'm not the only one."
Yeah.
Right?
Like,
And if we aren't doing, I guess you and I, and people like us and people who you've been interviewing aren't doing our own work first, then how can we ask any questions that help?
right.
Right? I'm just going through the book. I'm going through chapter 4 says to ask this. It's such a different rote process. And not that there's anything wrong with the process, but if we haven't yet, you know, built up to that, we're still below the line. We're still thinking, I should know this. And we're like Wayne Dyer would say, no, I think it was Tony Robbins who says, I'm shoulding all over myself.
Yes, that's Tony
We
Robbins. Yeah.
we should all over ourselves.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that anymore.
Yeah. No, me either. It's And it's interesting now being on the other side of that of I'm going to ask whatever questions I can now because if I don't know, I want to know. I want to
Yeah.
be curious and ask all these questions. So I've definitely moved past the shame in that. Um,
Mhm.
however, I guess my question is, as someone who's a conscious leader, how do you encourage people to start asking those questions themselves when they might be having shame for not knowing the answer, or shame for what their experiences might be, maybe judgment on what it means to not know the answers? 'Cause I'm just thinking like, as a child, I was very celebrated because it was a very smart child. I just knew how to read. No one taught me how to read. I just knew how to read. No one taught me math. I just knew how to do math, which was great to get through school and just, the answers.
Mhm.
Kind of sucks when you don't really know. How do I deal with this emotion?
Mhm.
How do I
Yeah.
process this? And then I'm going, I
Yeah.
should be smarter than this.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, because I know we all have our experiences that kind of influence how we move through life,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
For those who have been shamed, or like you said it within the church, don't ask questions. If you ask questions, you've got no faith. Um, for people who've had experiences like that where it's not safe to ask, how would you invite them to come forward and ask those questions or even ask those questions to themselves?
Yeah, I think it's got to start with themselves. So if anybody, regardless of position, again, going back to the definition I gave earlier of leadership, which is
Yeah.
just people who are willing to go first,
Yeah.
that's a huge word, willing.
Yes.
There will come a point at which your frustration and upset gets too boring in a weird kind of way, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, I'm just tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, right?
Yeah.
And hitting your head against a brick wall gives you a headache. And at some point, you're like, I just got to stop hitting my head against this wall. Huh. I think that becomes like an internal awakening in some case because you're doing a lot of things to try to get out of it, but you're not the doing isn't the problem here.
Yeah.
It's the being, right? So I really do believe that what you seek is seeking you.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so if you're out there thinking, I'm the only one, oh my gosh, nobody else is doing this. No, that's not true. And if anybody's listening to this, they could find you or me. I mean, at least there are two people in the world. So if you are doing the work you're doing, Catherine, to get the word out about things, and as we do that, I don't always know the how of that.
Yeah.
I seem to have not mastered that yet. I've had 6 seasons of my podcast and I have 73 followers. So somehow I don't know how to get the word out about that, but I do trust that when the signal is greater than the noise, people find each other. And
Yes.
then, I think I wrote in the book, trouble shared is trouble halved,
Mm.
and joy shared is joy multiplied. So
I love
when you
that.
find your people one at a time, you listen differently in a coffee shop and you hear somebody who's saying something that is interesting to you, don't let that pass you by.
Yeah.
Just ask a question and they might think you're totally crazy and then you can go, oh, yeah, okay, just sorry, moving on, right?
Yeah.
But at least you tried, at least you did something to follow this. I'm going to call it an impulse and an inspiration, not a push but a pull.
Yes. Yes, I hear that. I want to go back to willing because you said that's such an important word. So
Mhm.
let's dissect that because
Yeah.
it's a word that just came into, I mean, it's been a word that I've known, but I've never thought of my willingness until
Mhm.
about the last year. And now I am really diving into it. So,
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Well, they say we need to be ready, willing, and able for anything to change, right? And I make a couple of assumptions. I've been told not to make assumptions because it makes an ass out of you and me, right?
yeah,
So my first assumption I always make, I will on purpose, is assume positive intent. I will always assume people are doing the best they can with what they know. I'm just that way. I will always, because the opposite is assume negative intent, which means they're out to throw a gotcha bomb at you. I mean, I'm not going to go through
who
the world that
wants
way,
to
right?
live under that
I
reality?
can't. I can't anymore. So that's not my reality. So the first thing is able. I kind of believe people are able if they're curious about it. Now, I'm not saying positional ability, because if you're in a workplace where you don't have the ability to make a decision, that's different,
Yeah,
right? I don't have the resources. My position doesn't allow me to do that. I'm talking about personal ability.
Yeah.
I have the ability to think about this, and not everybody does, but a lot of people do. Um, able, ready. I mean, if you're hearing this podcast, if you're hearing this interview, if you're hearing, the signal somewhere, Wayne Dyer's voice or somebody, you're like, whoa, you're ready in some way.
Yeah.
However, the willingness is up to you, us, each of us, in the space of, I don't want to know what I am learning. I don't want to know. I want to go back below the line where it's a lot easier, where I can close my ears and go, la, 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 la. I don't want to know. Don't want to know. That's willingness.
Yeah.
At some point, you have to be willing to let go of old ways of being, old mindsets. Um, when you're in kindergarten, you have to be willing to let go of sleeping on a mat and be willing to say, I have to learn something new. To go from one, grade to the next, maybe I have to be willing to let go of some of those friends who aren't going to come with me to the new school.
Yeah.
And sometimes we dig our heels in and we're doing the doing of the things, but we're not doing it willingly.
Mm,
And
yes.
when that kind of shifts and we're like, oh, I have the ability to be willing. I have the ability to be willing. Whoa, then things start to open up.
Agreed. Agreed. I've there's a book series that I've read by David Hawkins. I don't know if you're familiar
Of
with it.
course, of course.
Okay. And he talks about the willingness.
Mhm.
And I didn't realize before reading that book how often my lack of willingness was getting in my own way. And I know before we were talking about like the division and this fighting for our right
Yeah,
to be angry and stuff, I was not willing to let my anger go. I
right.
was not willing to forgive. I was not
Mhm.
willing to move forward, but I wanted everything to change. But
Yeah,
I was like,
yeah,
I've done enough. I don't need to
right.
do anymore. These people need to change now.
Yep,
And it was
yep.
in my willingness of going, you know what? I'm going to forgive them whether they're
Mm,
sorry or not. I'm doing
right.
this for me. I'm willing to let go of my anger. I'm willing to become more loving. I'm willing to walk on the edges of my love to see what else is available. And then
Yep.
everything started to shift when I stepped into that willingness.
Yeah, yeah. And your story of that, if people aren't in a space to do that themselves, your story of that can feel like fiction.
Yeah.
Oh, it worked for you. Yeah, sure, because if we're steeped in that below the line wanting to be right part, we will find evidence to prove we are right.
Yes.
That only happens to people like Catherine. That only happens to people, blah, blah, blah. And the really interesting part about that is if I'm my job as a coach is to hold space for people to be wherever they are. That to me is so much harder than going, do it, get over here, do this. It's so much easier to go, knock it off. That's just stupid. What are you talking about? That's dumb. That's
Yeah.
so much easier. Holding
Yeah.
space and going, in your time, you will figure. Oh man. So you and I both impatient, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Yet when you share your story about how that happened for you, that's not fiction.
Yeah.
I'm sharing the reality of my experience.
Yeah.
And if you, someone else who wants to hear the story or read it in a book or whatever, if you want that too, the key is willingness.
Mm. Yes.
But if you don't want it and you just want to be right about it, it won't open up for you. It can't. It's like
Yeah.
the lock is locked and that's not the right key.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think people, no, let me rephrase. I know for myself in the past, when I wasn't willing, people would try and hand me the key, and I'd be trying to take it to another door and going, see, no, it
Ah,
doesn't work on this door. Do you know what I mean? They're like, no, over
yes,
here.
right. Yes. Oh, that's such a good analogy. That's so good. Yes. Yes, completely can relate to that.
So I know you said you find it so difficult to hold space for people with where they're at, but this is obviously something that you do every
Hmm.
day with
Hmm.
people. What encouragement or words of advice would you give to those who are in conscious leadership positions that are in a space of holding space for other people while trying not to buy into the limitations and support
Hmm.
them in the limitations while also holding space? Because I tend to have a hard time with that where I'm like, I get your sadness right now is I get that it's there. I
Yeah.
understand why it's there, but also you're just on a loop here.
Right. So I would notice You just said but. I would notice when I say but because that negates everything I say after it. So I'd say, I understand your sadness and, the yes and thing has been a really good tool for me that I've worked
Okay.
on. Yes and, yes and, yes and. It's from improv. If you know much about improv comedy, there's never a yeah, but. There's always a, what I love about that idea is blank. And what if we did this?
Okay.
And so you never negate. I mean, you're sad. Oh, yes, everything's horrible. Yes, I so totally get that. And staying in
Mm,
that sadness is producing a result you already know.
mm.
Is there any opportunity if you shifted just a little bit that that sadness could shift just a little bit? I don't know. I could be wrong. But what if? And so I do a lot of what if and yes and.
I love that. I just even you expressing, yeah, but, or yes, and the energy is 100% different
hmm
with those
hmm
two statements. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, my pleasure. You, the thing that I hope people can get from this is we've never met before. We've never talked before.
Yeah,
You and I have never, I've looked a little bit online. We have one friend in common, and when we see each other in each other, even virtually, energy is non-geographic. And so, in the space that you've provided for me to speak into, I feel very safe. I
yeah,
feel very much that I can share what I'm working through, even if I haven't got it all figured out yet, and share with you what I've learned and all those kinds of things. When people sense that they are safe, psychologically safe,
yeah,
there's a whole lot of opportunity. And you learn and I learn, and neither of us knows it all, and neither of us wants to know it all, because I
yeah.
think, we're both curious. And that just means that we're in the space of learning focus. So if you've watched this and you've heard it on, I don't know if you do audio and video, do you do both?
It's just video, actually.
Just video. So even if you don't want to watch the video, you can just listen to it in the background. You'll still get this experience of what happens when two people come together who don't even know each other, but really do,
Yes,
right?
two people with common ground. Yes.
Yeah. And they're out there, you guys. They're out there for you. They're out there. They just maybe haven't known how to go first.
Yeah.
So somebody has to go first. And
Mm,
and you could be the one to go first.
yes.
That's willingness.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Now, one last question, and I tend to ask
Mhm.
all of my guests on the show. If
Okay.
you could deliver one message to the world right now, what
Mm.
would you want the world to know?
Mm. Just one. Just one. Notice where you go unconscious. Just notice for yourself. Where do you feel tension? Where in your body do you feel it? I said I feel it in my jaw.
Yeah.
For so long, I didn't understand that the left side of my jaw hurt so much, and I couldn't figure out why. And at some point, I went, I don't really like this jaw hurting like this. What else could this mean? And then I got a hold of Louise Hay's work, and somewhere I just discovered a lot of things. So notice for yourself. My first life coach told me, just notice what you notice.
Mm.
And that's the card I pulled. That's the card I pulled.
It's just observe. Yes.
Notice what you notice. And if you're like I used to be, well, what do you mean by that? What are the rules to that? Let me write notes. Tell me what to just notice.
Yeah.
Just start noticing what's drawing your attention. What is it, people in the world? What are you noticing?
Mm.
I'm noticing that mothers are really loving to their kids in the store. Awesome. Let's go with that.
Yeah.
I'm noticing that anybody who has money is a jerk. Okay, great. Let's go with that. What are you noticing? It's
Yeah.
going to show you what's occurring in your awareness when you
Mm.
notice what you notice.
Yeah. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So, anybody who is wanting to work with Jodee or find out more about her work, you can find her at Jodee Bock, and it's JodeeBock.com, as well as she's on Facebook at facebook.com/JodeeB, and also on LinkedIn at Jodee Bock.
Mhm. I
So,
don't do much with the fun ones yet. Instagram, TikTok. Ooh, I'm not there.
yeah,
You
it
want to
gets
find
to
me?
be a lot,
It
right?
does. It does.
Yeah.
YouTube. I also have a YouTube channel, Get Real
Okay.
with Jodee Bock. I didn't tell you about that one, but all my podcasts are there as well. So if you want to see my interviews, they're there.
Awesome. I'm actually, thank you so much for joining us here today, Jodee, and I look forward to sharing your message with the
Thank
world.
you. Vice versa, my friend. This has been a joy. Thank
Awesome.
you.
You're welcome.